Marble. This is a material that many people try to make. Some make it to the finish line, but the result is just boring. During Nodevember, I created my own version of a marble material with a bloody touch. Now let me show you how I can build this marble floor in 3 stages, starting with the pattern and finishing with some nice reflection. Now let's get to it. Now this is the material that I have created for this specific occasion. You can see that instead of doing my marble just as many people do, like a single shape, I created a specific pattern to follow this, and I add this kind of prompt from the Nodevember to create a more kind of bloody and interesting pattern with a lot of things on top of it. So let's start with the pattern. So my main shape was going to be a shape node with a square with a scale of 0.97. Then in order to make this shape, I get it into a transform 2D and I set the tiling to no tiling. So you can do this by just coming here, go transformation 2D, clicking this icon, set it to absolute, and then you go to no tiling. This is going to allow you to tile this, and if you go outside of the area, it's not gonna generate anything else. If you leave it as it is by default, you are gonna have a tiling problem, my friend, even when shrinking the shape. Now let's kind of try to analyze why are we doing this. So we're doing this because we want this area in the center. Yes, we want to build this inner shape. So I first created the circle, the center of it, and now I have to create the corners. And in order to do the corners, I grab a shape node with a value of 1 and a value of 0.01 in wide scale, and then I use a transformation 2D to rotate this 45 degrees and blend them with an add to create a cross. I subtracted this cross here, and this is fully procedural, so I can go in here and start making changes like this, and my material is gonna change as well. And you can see how that's working. I'm using really low value because it needs to be really low. It shouldn't be that strong at this point. Now I'm using exactly the same shape we used at the beginning, the same square with the same transformation 2D, with a new one just to fill up the same space using an add. Now it was trying to make this shape tile, and you can see it here. So I used a tile generator with a value of 10 by 10, and it changed the scale to 1.02. That's everything I'm gonna do in this tile generator because the secret comes next. We have to do this diamond shape that we had here, and in order to do that, I just created a square. I lowered the scale to 0.56 and rotated 45 degrees. I input it into a tile generator that has exactly the same values as my previous tile generator. The only thing that might have changed is the offset, which I changed the global offset to 0.05 in X and Y. Now that we had this, we need to repeat exactly the same we did before with the center of the square. We need to subtract this to our pattern to finish our main shape. Then I'm using a blur, grayscale, and a threshold to generate this more kind of like round shape. You can see how we went from this kind of really nice sharp and corner shape to something blur and then more rounded, and we input this into our blend node using an add linear. Now this is where we are going to start to get the details in. So the first detail is going to be the edges, of course. As always, edges go first after the pattern. In this case, I use a slope blur with an sample of 32, an intensity of 0.01, and a mode of min with a pellet noise at the scale of 60. This allowed me to create these edges here with these kind of bevels. The reason we are not really working that much the edges in this one is because this material is supposed to be almost perfect. I added a little bit of degradation on it, but only for it to work better with a bevel that we're going to be using later. Then I use a slope blur grayscale to generate even smaller details. You can see in this edge here how things change. And in here I use a value of, let's read this, 0.0005 in a min mode. The Gaussian spots, it's styled by 8, so it's really small. Now in order to finish this part, I use a bevel with an intensity of 0.01 and no smoothing, so we have this image here. If I create a normal map here, and set the intensity to 5 as I have it at the beginning, you're gonna see how the slopes actually made their job. So if I pull this here, you're gonna see how this is gonna look way more destroyed and kind of like weird. If I pull this back to the bevels, you're gonna see that now it feels a little bit better, but it maintains some of those details. So if I pull this here, you're now gonna see that it's looking just as it should as in our reference. Now let's go to the surface detail. Surface detail in this case was a little bit more harder than other times, but because I need to be really soft. So I created a black and white spots 2 and tile it by 3. I use a high pass grayscale with a value of 1.65, and I use a levels where I push my background to the white areas. That way I only get these dots. You can see and stop the video to see yes, these parameters here to check and have the exact same levels. From here, we're gonna blur this information with the 0.1 value and use a levels once again to throw these values up. Now we are gonna blend this with our main pattern using a subtract and a value of 0.01. If I start moving my light around, you're gonna see that these holes here are the ones that we are talking about. And the reason we are using really low values is because this is supposed to be a detail. We don't want to take it that far away. So we are using a Gaussian spots one. Yes, we should have changed the Roughness even in this case I only changed the disorder as an opacity mask. Now here to the good part. We are using this map here. Yes, that if I'm not wrong is the metal scratch it that you have to kind of like import it this way into Substance Designer. Looks like it's not exactly the same, but it's somehow similar. Yes, and I turn this into grayscale information. Then I use the levels to get specifically the scratches. I use a shape and a blur. Yes, the shape has a value of 0.83 just to make this. I'm going to multiply both together so I remove these edges. Why? Because when I input this into a tile generator, there's not going to be hard edges. If I pull this in, you're going to see that we might start to have some really sharp edges going around, and that's no good. We don't want that. We want more contrast. We want less sharp edges. Finally, I use a levels. Yes, pulling the blacks towards the whites. You can stop the video now and see my parameters here. I have my level in high to 1 and my level in low to 0.5 just to get this really nice looking pattern. From here, I input this into a blend node and again, I subtract it. As you can see, this is really low. Yes, because if we go like this, it's just gonna kind of like destroy my marble and I didn't want to happen. So I just went really soft, super soft. So you can see there are some details that are actually being shown, but I didn't want it to be that strong. In fact, I can go this with a stronger pattern, just like this, just to have it be a little bit more rougher. And you can see now that it feels a little bit more rougher. This is the problem with some of these materials. Material like these need not for the right node, but for the right intensity. And they need for you to actually check if what you are adding to your surface is actually going to help or not. This is helping because if I see my material from far away, it's not really affecting this that much. Of course, because I have my blood on top. But as I zoom in and start moving the light, that's when I start to notice these really nice details that are adding value to the story. Now, right here, what I'm doing, I'm blending a perlin noise with a scale of 32, yes, into a multiply with a grunge concrete node. This is just to make a more interesting mask and that it doesn't just have blur on the same mask we always use. Now let's go to the concrete that is in between or the cement. I use a threshold from the initial map, the one after the slow blur. Then I blur this and I use a level to expand the values. You can see it here. I pull the whites really next to the blacks and the blacks more to their center. Then I put this into a non-uniform blur, both with a sample and blaze at maximum and intensity of 0.1. After that, I'm multiplying this by a perlin noise to add a little bit of height variation, and finally, I am setting both of them into a high blend. As you can see, there's a sharpen before the high blend is so that it sharpens only the tiles, because if I sharpen the concrete, it's so thin that it actually doesn't help. So we want this to be like this. The concrete or cement should be in the bottom and the tile should be on the top. Now, if you have finished this step, your materials should look somehow like this. Yes, and you can already see without the color, your material looks really nice. Yes, this is where you kind of learn if your material is actually going in the right direction or not. And it's because with that, even if you don't have the base color, the shape and details in it are really nice. But as well, it really allows you to see the roughness if you have added to it as well. So let's get back to it once again here and choose the right color. So now that we have this, we need to start with our base color. And this is where we are going to make it into some specific sequence because we need to create some marble veins. I have seen a lot of people trying to create marble veins, but the way I did it today was a little bit easier than you may fall. So I'm going to delete these nodes because I'm not using them, and let's see how they start. So first I choose two colors. Yes, I wanted the colors of these tiles to be one really light color and the other ones to be really dark. The reason for this is to generate some contrast so shapes are actually really easy to read. I created a mask, yes, where I put all the dark shapes into one map and use it to generate this initial map. You can see that it's affecting everything. I'm using this hex color for the white area and I'm using this hex color for the darker area. Now let's try to move forward. In the next step, I started to add veins. So how did I do my marble veins? I actually took a node from Substance Painter. Yes, Substance Painter has a node called marble veins. So you can look it in Substance Painter, show for reference, and drop it inside Substance Designer to get this node. Now that you have this node, I'm using a stage transform with a tile of 13 and a random value on the offset. And I'm doing this hard because of the tiling of my material. In order for this to work, I have to create a flat fill and a flat fill to random color, allowing my node to assign RGB values to each of the shapes that are in my material. This will help me to warp my map, yes, into different directions and allowing each of these shape, each of these color have a different pattern of my marbles. That's how we go from a marble pattern like this to a marble pattern like this, where this marble, despite being lines connected, they're not going to be connected with the other lines. Yeah. So I'm using this as a mask, and you can see that my copy value is low because this is a background. Yes, this is a background color and noise. You can see that right here. Yes, it's not really visible. So if I go back and I remove the blood, a part of it, you're gonna see that there's several kinds of marbles. Our marble lines right now, they actually were really small, yet we have some that are really big. So let's move forward on this. So from these marbles, using this hex color you see here on screen, yeah, I use an opacity of 0.23. Now I repeat this again, but with my marbles with another parameter. So in the first one, I use a disorder of 18 and a balance of 0.8. In the second one, I use a disorder of 18 and a balance of 0.5. Yes, I was trying to look for, let's say, less big lines, but now that I come to think about this is the marble veins node, this is a marble fine, so there's two nodes you can use. Yes, and marble fine looks really nice to making these fine lines in marbles materials. So I styled this by random with a value of 4 with a stage transform, and again I did a vector warp. Once I did that, I use this color hex node, yes, and I use a copy. In this case, I set it to 1. Why? Because these are going to be my foreground marble lines. Yeah, you can see how we are building things up. Yes, from here to here, and then we go to the next one that we're about to see it. We are building color over color. We are layering things. I'm not trying to do all together. I'm picking each of these pieces and treating them individually into my material. Next one is the color variation. So for the color variation, I did something different. I used another marble grunge from Substance Painter. In this case, a grunge marble shapes. Yes, it generates all of these nice details. I tile it by 2, set it to random, then again a vector scale, but then I use a levels. And these levels is going to use as a mask. You can see exactly where this is going. You can copy the parameters from here as well. Now I put it into a gradient map to transform it from grayscale to color, and I input both into a blend node connected to my base color. So in the background, you're gonna have your main base color. In your opacity, you're gonna have your levels, and in the foreground you're gonna have your gradient map, and you're gonna use a multiply. This allowing to darken certain areas of your material. Now if we're gonna darken certain areas of the material, we need to kind of like lighten other areas. That's why we have a second edition of that, where we use another levels. In this case, they're exactly the same actually. Yes, we could actually use the same values, but in this specific or particular case, we are only adding these to the dark areas. You can see that my mask is the one we use for the dark colors. Yes, and we are adding more contrast to this. But in this case, we are not using the multiply, we are using the add sub. So we have areas that are getting a little bit darker and others that are getting a little bit whiter to generate some contrast on top of the material. Now following up, I just reused the same color as before into my threshold or the mask of this. If you want to get the mask, you just go to your hide blend and you use the hide mask output, in order to get this. And now we're gonna start with the blood, and I'm gonna remove the blood for a moment. Yes, this is the final steps of our base color. So as I was doing before, I was taking some assets from Substance Painter, and it came to me that maybe I could find someone that was actually really good in there. And actually I find 4 of them. I didn't find just one, I find 4, and it was really nice. So I went over and I replicate the same technique I was using before. I'm using a shape that is lower in scale on 0.83 and this blur to generate these blur edges, so that when I multiply these by different grunges, I'm not gonna be getting any hard edges. Yeah, so I'm using the grunge stains large hollow, and using grunge stains small hollow, and grunge stain spots. You can find all of them in Substance Painter. Then I input them into a tile generator. I set the amount to 20 by 20 and the pattern input number to 4, so all of them could get in. But the 4th pattern is not really in. and there's a reason for that. It's because we were actually going to use it later for a more strong blood color. So you're gonna set the scale to 2.39 and the scale random to 0.24. Once you have that, you go rotation random at maximum and you increase your luminance random to 0.45. Remember to change your blending mode to max. If you don't and you set this to add, what is going to happen is there are some areas that are gonna look way stronger, yes, and your material is gonna look completely different. If I leave it like this, for example, right now, there's gonna be some spots that are gonna look stronger, yes, higher than one. If I set it to max, they're gonna look more balanced. Yeah, and that's what we're trying to achieve. Now after this, I got into a levels and I pull my values up. You can see I pull my blacks towards the middle, and I started to create a specific mask here. You can see. So I got my grunge wipes magic. I wanted to kind of like pull some wipe marks of blood, like if someone was kind of like carrying them around after they killed them. I'll use the same technique with a multiply to get this map and use a tile generator. I use exactly the same parameters. The only thing is I changed the scale to 1915, and also remember to change your random X and Y position. There I use the levels to add more contrast, and I'm adding this with the max lighting into the background of these spots. Yeah. Later I did another tile generator that we are gonna be soon. After you combine them both together, you go down and you're gonna create this uniform color. You can copy this hex code to get the exact color I'm using. You're gonna blend this into a copy and it's gonna give you these spots. Now, in order to do this better and to have a better show of your material, what we are going to do is we're gonna create a new tile generator here where we're gonna input the wipe, and we're gonna do large marks of blood being thrown everywhere, and this is gonna be way stronger. So again, 20 by 20, but the scale is gonna be 8.92 with a scale random of 0.31. Position offset is gonna be just 1 on the position random, and the rotation random is gonna be 1 as well. The luminance random is gonna be 0.45, and again, we're gonna use the random mask of 0.95. This is really important because if I remove this, everything is gonna be white, but if I input this, you're gonna see that you have more space to work with. Now, after using this as a mask here, you're gonna have your final color and blood all over the place. And most probably without your roughness, your material should look something like this. Yeah, so we are gonna see how we actually do to make that roughness. After that, you're gonna get your curvatures move into a gradient map, and you're gonna input into a blend node. This blend node should have the overlay, and it's gonna help you create more shape. You can see how there's kind of like a feeling of shape now in the material. That's what you're looking for and that you want to have. After this, we're gonna sharpen this with a value of 1 to get the best result for our base color. You can see how realistic this looks right now, and that's gonna be the end for your base color on this material. So now that we have our base color, we need to do a roughness, and in this case I went really straightforward. So I started with a uniform color that is grayscale, of course, with an output of 0.23. I didn't want to go 0 because I wanted to be not that shiny, but after that I got my sharpen and converted it into grayscale. So I'm taking my color into grayscale conversion and I'm inverting this. Why am I inverting this? So you need to remember something. Color with light works a little bit different to how roughness tells you. So in real life, yes, when you have a dark color, yes, let's say like dark, like black, this color, when light touches this color, the color is gonna absorb the light. It's not gonna reflect that much. But if out of the blue you have a white color, yes, this color is gonna reflect more light. Yeah, so basically dark absorbs more light, not allowing most of the light to reflect, and white color allows light to reflect more. So regardless of how this looks, we need to change that. So I'm inverting this so that the darker areas are the ones that actually do not reflect that much, and the whiter areas are the darker parts that actually reflect more light. Then I use a histogram scan to lower everything. Sorry, not a histogram scan, and histogram range. I set the position to 0.22, so everything is kind of dark, and I blend this with a copy mode into 0.53 value of opacity. Yes, allowing me to maintain the more kind of like, let's say, shiny part of the material. You can see the difference here, although this one looks really nice. Yeah, you can see the contrast there on the line, but for the moment I really like this on the render. Now moving forward, we need to add both masks on the blood. So you're gonna use both masks here, yes, and you on the different blood stains, you're gonna use this one and this one, yeah, and you're gonna input them into two blend nodes with the add linear dodge. The first one, that are the small spots, you're gonna use a value of 0.05. But for the second one, you're gonna go harder. And you are not going to add the information, you're gonna subtract it. Why? What we are trying to say here is that this The first blood stains, the small ones, are the ones that were easy to, were too small, so they were the first ones to get dry. The second ones, that are the ones that are actually quite strong, are being subtracted with a value of 0.29, allowing our material to reflect the light in a really nice way. If you have followed the full tutorial, then this is how your material should be looking. Now that you have this, it will be nice to render this material in Marmoset, but it might be hard to get the result on screen. After all, I'm using Marmoset 2.4 and ray tracing, and I had to do several testings before calling it done. If you don't want to waste that much time into this part of the material process creation, then you can join our free Discord server where other professional material artists of the industry are helping other artists learn how to create breathtaking materials, and they can give you a hand into looking what parameters you need to change to get these results on your renders. You can join us with the link in the description of this video. Now I hope you liked today's tutorial, guys, and I will see you next week.